How's everyone doing tonight? This is Chopping It Up Hardcore with Hal Capone. Discussion number 84. Tonight, my special guest is Drew Lamond. I was just on a second ago, but I see him right now, and I'm going to grab him. Just give me 1 second. Drew, how you doing?
Hello, how are you doing?
Good. Can you hear me all right?
I think so, yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, doing the IG live thing first is kind of tricky if the first time doing it.
I'm an old guy. I don't get all this technology. It's sad. I'm an audio engineer for 20 years and I still have problems with Instagram and Facebook and all this stuff. I don't really do the social media stuff too much. So,
Well, I want to thank you so much for taking time out to discuss with me like old times and what you have going on now, and like we were talking about, Torn Apart is just really special to me, being from New England. You guys played up here a bunch, and I was lucky enough to see a handful of times up here, and like I said, my group of friends that were in bands like Fault and Ukla the Mock really loved Torn Apart too. So it's just to get to talk to you and speak to you about the old times.
awesome. Looking forward to it. Yeah, I appreciate the invite. It's an honor.
Usually my first question is, what were you listening to before you got into punk and hardcore, and what did you start listening to get into punk and hardcore as a kid?
My dad, I guess like most dads around me, listened to a lot of what was called classic rock, the Zeppelin, Who, Beatles, and that's what everybody listened to in middle school. And then I think the first kind of branching out would be thrash metal, like getting into Slayer, Metallica, Megadeth, Testament, that sort of stuff, and just buying records and albums and things because of the cover, and then getting into death metal, or what I would consider death metal. Genre names are so different nowadays, but like Obituary was a big one, and Tomb, bands like that, and just anything very just metal. And I really came across hardcore and punk probably not until I'd say about halfway through high school, when I met Devin, the original drummer of Torn Apart, and he was way more into like the Gorilla Biscuits and the Chain of Strengths and Youth of Today and that sort of stuff, and which was great because it was just this whole new world. And I show up with my metal baggage, and he's got his hardcore punk baggage, and we put together this thing in high school with no great plans. It was just thought of the name. Torn Apart, I think, on our way to Taco Bell, and just sort of like it just happened. But musically, that's kind of where I came from, probably more of the metal world. Even though I never wanted to be a shredder or anything like that. I was more into, I think that's why I got into Obituary and Entomb, Sepultura, that sort of stuff, Napalm, some Napalm Death, and things that had more grind to it and rhythm. I always liked the rhythm aspect of it, and that's what I liked about hardcore. And I think by the time I got into hardcore, some metal started to seep in a bit, and our earlier stuff was probably more hardcore, and then we got a little bit more metal-y, in some aspects. But yeah, probably about the best answer, I'd say.
Yeah. Now, were you skateboarding back then? Because I know I always talk to people, and it was like bridging the gap with skateboarding, getting into hardcore metal or punk. Were you a skateboarder when you were young?
Yeah, but I probably not the greatest. I could do some tricks here and there, like with the neighborhood kids. But Brett, our singer, was really good at that. He was more of the skater. The rest of us had some mild chops here and there, but I don't think we were any kind of into it more than a fad to a certain degree. I think music was more of our thing. Brett was, of course, too, but he was really not only into it, but he was good at skating for a good bit, for sure.
Now, were your parents open to the metal thrash, like, because some of those images and what they're talking about is kind of, you get some crazy extreme, topics. Were they scared that you were listening to that type of music at a young age?
Yeah, I'm lucky. I grew up out I grew up in Baltimore County, so around here, meaning that it's, you know, I say I'm from Baltimore and everybody thinks one thing, but I actually grew up about, you know, 25 or 20 miles north of the city, which is the county, which is farm country and that sort of thing. And I went to school in Towson, which is closer to the city, but uh, um, yeah, I was lucky growing up out in that neck of the woods. My parents weren't really strict for some reason. A lot of my friends had some strict parents, but my parents were fairly open, especially socially. I mean, my dad took me to see George Carlin, I think, in the sixth grade live or something like that. All these comedians, and took me to rock concerts and stuff. But he was had a good corporate job and had a military background, even though he didn't really. You wouldn't know it so much if you know him, or if you just met him. But I grew up in a household where it was, I think, some aspects were strict, but in the arts and it was kind of a free for all as long as it wasn't super graphic or anything, because they didn't seem to mind so much about um, you know, skulls and skateboarding to like Slayer covers and, you know, being into all that sort of stuff, because they could, I think they could kind of tell that I was into it. I was just interested in it. I wasn't like living it to like it was, you know, to my detriment. You know, like I was like, hey, this is pretty cool, you know, which is sort of how it was for me and most of Torn Apart anyway. I mean, I was always the guy that didn't have tattoos and piercings and everything, and would just be standing there, and people didn't really think I was in the band, or I just didn't look the part. I just never really fully bought into the you know, that part of it. I listened to it and that sort of stuff, but I never really, you know, grew my hair out, and I just short attention span. I don't know what it is,
but yeah. Were you going to shows like the metal shows and thrash shows back then, or did
not? I had a really cool experience. A friend of mine, when I think it was in the sixth or seventh grade, his mom's cousin or something like that, somebody knew, was working at a big club down here called Hammer Jacks at the time, which has come and gone. But it's where all the big bands played back then. And I must have been in middle school, and they got me in on like a weeknight to go see Social Distortion, which whatever, but the Ramones played. And I had like, I was on the second level and I could see perfectly down, like I was almost in a movie set. It just didn't seem real. The guys on stage, they were just going in like fifth gear just the whole time. It was amazing. And I was in middle school, so it just blew my mind. And I think that going to some rock concerts with my dad, nothing, you know, not often, but the ones I went to, like, you know, I was very lucky to see like the Rolling Stones and things like that with him. By the time I hit high school, I'm going to hardcore shows, which again blew my mind, because there's these little holes in the wall, and you get to meet you know, I'm going to and from high school, listening to all these mixtapes and everything, and then I go see these bands. I get to meet them and talk to them, you know, and it's all down to earth. It was just such an awesome thing. Right before that, I did not, sorry to be scatterbrained a little bit, but right before that, I was going to shows with friends of mine before I got in the hardcore scene, more metal shows, and those weren't as friendly, like more local metal shows. They had this sort of air of like they're going to open for Metallica or Tool one day and all this stuff, and it was a stepping stone. It just wasn't really, you know, like I didn't like it. Whereas hardcore, that one of the appealing things to me was how approachable it was. Yeah. I thought really, really awesome. And how kind of you're definitely not doing it to be famous. You know, that you're not going to make any money doing it, and you'll be a relic, you know, pretty quickly. You know, so enjoy it while you can. So,
when did you start playing guitar? Was it, you know, like obviously you Torn Apart, you almost said was like your first band, correct?
Yeah.
So when did you start playing guitar before this Torn Apart band happened?
Off and on, maybe in elementary school, and then I think probably middle school. I started doing a lot of metal and a lot of the Metallicas and the Megadeths and the Slayers and that sort of stuff in middle school. I took some lessons here and there, but really kind of more self-taught. Pretty good ear, but again, not a shredder. I'm not a fast. I always gravitated to just going from one chord to another, or one note to another. I like progressions and just simple progressions and rhythms. I was really into rhythms and not so much of the riff, which I still kind of am. So that mentality, I like how everything kind of works together.
Yeah.
So I've always, I grew up going to friends and my cousin was in bands, and my friends were in bands, and they were always more that metal kind of high school band. Really good guys got a good double bass and whipping around on double bass, and everybody's doing the crazy leads and all this stuff, and it just never really, it didn't resonate with me. It partially because I couldn't do it and didn't really want to. I mean, I might have been able to, but also it just didn't resonate. It just wasn't. It didn't catch me like I did when I started seeing some hardcore bands and having more of a groove and kind of, it was just a thicker sort of cooler vibe to it. But I really didn't get into guitar, I think, until like maybe middle school or so.
Yeah, it's funny that you say like a groove with Torn Apart, because I feel like Torn Apart is kind of a band that's very, it's a rare band because the groove of everything, and it's almost like the funkiness of the rhythms that play in Torn Apart are very different from the hardcore bands that were going on at that time. Like, almost like you always had like a crazy like head bob to a Torn Apart song. It's funny that you say that because it goes hand in hand of what like I'm speaking about right now. Do other people say that about Torn Apart's music? That it's almost like when you guys break from a transition, there's like another funky part, and then it hits you hard again, and then do people say that to you?
Well, I don't know, not really. I think I've never heard, yes, but not like, to be honest, I really haven't heard specific descriptions of our band. I think like the funny thing is I think also looking back, our band existed, it was very flash in the pan, everything from relationships. We would go to cities and see people we haven't seen in a month or a year, a couple of years. And it was like we hadn't, it's like we just saw them yesterday. So it was just this quick, like, we're right back. We got along with a lot of people and had a lot of fun, but it's weird. It's like there wasn't a lot of looking back and a lot of discussion about things, and the way the band sort of dissolved and kind of got back together, put out that last album and then dissolved again. There wasn't a lot of like recollection and looking back and description of the band. I mean, and like you said, there's not a lot about it online. So it's I think it was one of those types of bands where if you saw us live, it was a really good show and really good time, a lot of energy and that sort of thing. But it after a while, we just sort of fizzled out. And I think we had this, I don't know if people got into us after the fact or if it was just a thing back in the day. So to be honest with you, like, you probably know more than I do is talking to people. I've never really sat down and discussed it before, in depth like that.
Yeah. Now, do you have younger people coming up and talking to you about Torn Apart? Because I feel like there's like a resurgence of younger kids finding older music now, whatever genre it is, because like you were saying, there's so many genres now that, but I see a lot of younger kids getting into older music now. Do you find like people that you talk to day to day, or people that hit you up on Instagram talking about Torn Apart being younger and liking it now?
Not a lot. I really no. So, I mean, it's more of, again, like if I get asked, because I've been in the studio for a long time, so I'm involved in music to some capacity, of course, but not with hardcore. But people will ask if I played in a band once in a while, and I'll mention it, and they'll look me up. Oh yeah, okay, that's cool, and that sort of thing. But there's not a lot of I don't know if there's a huge newer fan base, and I don't know if that's just they're much bigger bands in our genre that have either stuck around or they just had such a big name that the name sort of stayed for a while. I just think we were kind of more of we had our thing in the day, and once once things were over, I just don't think I think we're not quite of that tier of like people kind of getting into us as much, like new people, it seems like to me, because I just don't hear about it as much these days.
Yeah, maybe just because there's not much online about.
Yeah.
I mean, that could be the reason why, honestly. I wanted to ask how the band got together. You were saying the original drummer and you kind of got together. How did Brett and everybody else how did you form Torn Apart and go to making the demo cassette that you guys put out?
Um, Basically, like I went to high school with Devin, the drummer. We sort of uh, met through mutual friends, and he lived right across the street practically from where we went to high school. And I was, you know, desperate, but not desperate in the sense, but I was just like, cool. And he was like, because I for a while I was like thinking I'd be in a metal band or something, and when he's like, yeah, I'm in a hardcore punk, I didn't know what it was, and frankly didn't care. I was like, cool, I'm down, jam.
Yeah.
We got along really well, and I went over to his house, and his Devin's older brother Mike had a ton of music, a ton of records and 7 inches, and again, all new. This is a whole new world to me. I'm out in the county and stuff with my metal CDs and everything, and he's they're showing me all this music, and we're going to occasional shows. Um, there's a band from around here called Next Step Up, which is a very, very band, and a lot. They helped us out tremendously, especially in the beginning. I mean, they were one of the biggest bands around here, so they hooked us up with shows and connections and all that sort of stuff. So um, uh, Devin was friends with those guys, so I think we kind of hung out with those guys, and then with Mike and Brett. Mike was the second guitar player. They were in another band. They went to a high school, the next high school over, through friends of friends. Or I'm sorry, Brett did. Mike, they went to school together, but Mike and I went to school together. So but they knew Brett. It's all convoluted. But anyway, we just kind of sort of knew each other through mutual friends and sort of slowly kind of got together. And I think originally Torn Apart, before Brett, the bass player from Next Step Up, sang in Torn Apart for like a very, very brief period of time. And then he left, and then that's when we're like, all right, we got to get a singer. And then Mike was like, I know a guy, I played in a band with him, Brett, and we saw their band, and weren't super into it because it was a different style. He sang and that sort of stuff. And we finally kind of begrudgingly asked him, and he begrudgingly accepted. It was this mutual kind of like, it might be cool, but we're sort of like, eh. And then he shows up and just wails. He didn't know what to do. We're playing music and he's just wailing away, and it just sort of kind of, we'd play basketball, we'd hang out, we'd write songs, and there was no ever really for a long time, I think in the beginning there's no real grand scheme or anything like that. I think we just sort of, once it was I played guitar, Mike was on the other guitar, Devin on drums, Brett on vocals, and Paul Price on bass, who was the original bassist.
Yeah.
We would get together every, once or twice a week, and like most bands, and just kind of go to shows, and just like, I think like most bands and most kids did exactly that. It wasn't until I think we put together some stuff, recorded the same place where Next Step Up recorded with Drew Mazurek, and did our demo, and started to kind of, I think just started to, like most bands, try to get our name out there and play more shows. And we're close to DC, so we go to, a lot of bands will come to DC. Baltimore gets skipped over a lot. They go to Philly or they go to DC. So we started to get pretty serious. Paul left the band. We got Drew. Nelson had a lot of contacts and stuff, and just really brought a different element to the whole band, and that was the core for a long time, where we did a bunch of recording and stuff, and a bunch of shows, and really I think that's when we started to kind of kick it into gear, and then from there, sort of goes here and there for sure, but that's pretty much how it started. And that's
And was the band started in 94? Was it 95 that you guys started, and then the demo tape came out?
I think 94. Yeah, I think it was 94. I was a junior in high school, so it was 94. And then I think it was 94 to about 2000 was the band. I don't think it was before that. I'm pretty sure. It's so foggy these days.
Yeah. So the demo I think came out in '95, and then the Extermination 7-inch came out the same year, didn't it? In
Yeah,
1995.
I mean, we probably went in. I don't remember exactly. We probably went in like within a year or less, I think, because we did the demo. And the idea for the demo was the guitar player for Next Step Up, Mike Ayers, was going to press it. He had a label at the time. Um, and for one reason or another, we just didn't get around to pressing it. And I think we had kind of moved on from that material a bit and recorded the next thing, which is the Extermination 7-inch. I think partially too because that summer that I think the reason why we did it so quick is because that summer is when Excessive Force and VOD were on tour.
Yeah.
And VOD we loved VOD, and they only had a demo out.
Yeah.
And Excessive Force had a 7-inch, and I forget what the connection was, but they stayed at our house for a night or two. We saw them play, and then we ended up playing a show with them. And it was one of our first shows, I think, with that lineup and everything or whatever. But we played out, and it was an early show. We played out in some place out in Maryland to like 10 people with VOD and Excessive Force and us, I think Excessive Force. And it was just, yeah, it was strange because VOD was trying to get on the label that Excessive Force was on, Dan,
Yeah.
all that stuff. And we hung out with them for a little bit, and Dan decided, I think mostly because we were nice guys. It wasn't super because he was into our music. It was somewhat of that, but also because he just liked us as people. He's like, I'll put out a 7-inch for you, and paid for the Extermination 7-inch, and put that out, and that seemed to do pretty well. So then he basically said, I'll do a full length. And I think at that point, that's when we started. We'd been playing shows, and we'd kind of been going up and down the East Coast, and
Yeah.
started really kind of booking. And this is pre-internet, you're no email or any of that sort of stuff. It's like one big cell phone and a suitcase and a bunch of Quest.
Yeah.
And not even MapQuest, actually, just maps. So even pre-MapQuest. So that was that's basically what led to that. And then Dan gave us money for Dan from Excessive Force and Life Sentence gave us money to do Nothing Is Permanent. And that was a blast. I think that was definitely that was definitely a high point, I think. And then we did a 7-inch after that. We did some recordings here and there, I think, for maybe a compilation or so. And then we did a 7-inch. The last 7-inch with Devin was when we got picked up by Ferret.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, our first thing with Aaron on drums was the 59 Session, which is basically that 7-inch we did with Devin with 3 additional songs as an EP, and we recorded all of them. And honestly, Ferret loved it, but we didn't know at the time. I think we were done at that point. We had all these great shows and all this stuff that we could have taken advantage of, and we just didn't. And it was kind of frustrating at the time, but looking back, it's just one of those things where I think we were just either burnt out or 5 people equally committed to this thing, and it wasn't happening. And it's tough when you have this, like, it's kind of laid out for you, and it's like, let's just do it, and you just don't do it.
Yeah. I wanted to ask about the Extermination 7-inch, the thought process behind, the lyrics and the message of that 7-inch. Were you all into that, or was that somebody else's kind of influence into being kind of, animal liberation and the straight and stuff like that?
It was more like, see, I kind of came, because I think I came from the metal world, and Mike, our other guitar player, is sort of a similar world. We didn't, like, I was never vegan, I was never straight edge or never vegetarian, and we never really discussed it as a band. It was like we were just 5 individuals and collectively came together and just whatever it was. There was never like, we weren't a straight edge band, we're a vegan band, we weren't a whatever band, like just kind of made whatever. And some of that was by design, some of that was we just weren't focused enough to really kind of be this. We're focused enough just to get together once or twice a week and write some songs. And um, like I wasn't a heavy drinker. I didn't really drink at all. But like
Yeah.
when on those guys, I didn't do anything, and I preferred not to do anything that was around them. But we did go a little heavy, and some of the guys in the band were vegetarian, vegan at times, and straight edge for sure. So some of those beliefs were reflective of some of the guys in the band, but not everybody. But there was no like, we weren't against it or anything like that. But I think that got kind of toned down as we went. I know that one thing there were some things that we may have agreed upon a little bit more as time went, and those might have reflected a little bit in the lyrics. But I'd say like lyrically, like 99.9% of it was Brett. He wrote the lyrics, he put the lyrics together, and that was his department. And there really wasn't any kind of criticism or sort of like coaching or anything. It was just like, you do what you do, like, because Brett didn't really care what we did. It's like he wasn't like, you should do this, and that was kind of a nice thing. I think for majority of the band, there wasn't, everybody had their space. Towards the end, that sort of diminished, and I think that's what kind of led to sort of a bit of the dissolving. But for the most part, yeah, I think that there was no real message.
Yeah. Now, do you think you were dubbed a straight edge band? Because back then, I thought you guys were definitely a straight edge band until Nothing Is Permanent. I definitely thought from what you put out before and that you guys were dubbed a straight edge band. And on top of that, being on Life Sentence, which was primarily a straight edge label at the time.
Well, if I'm thinking correctly, I think the Extermination 7-inch Brett has, I might be wrong, but I might be wrong, but whatever. I'm getting into so many minor details wrong. Doesn't matter. But I think that the cover of the Extermination 7-inch might be the show that we played with VOD and Excessive Force. Of course, we're all under 21, so we have the X's on our hands. So he's like this with an X on.
Yeah.
And Devin, on the back of that 7-inch, Devin, our drummer, is wearing his old Chain of Strength or something, like an old like shirt that he had a lot of pride. He had a lot of cool like old, like his brother had the colored vinyl and Devin had like the t-shirts and stuff like that, so but it's a drug-free youth or XXX or something like that on the back, and again, us not having any kind of like, oh, there's a cool picture of Devin playing, we'll put that on the back, and here's Brett and Paul, we'll put them on the front. I mean, we had a shirt one time where we looked around our basement where we practiced forever looking for something that we were going to screen. We eventually screened these shirts of ours, ourselves, and there are a bunch out there that are just like look awful. It's kind of printed awful and all this stuff, but it was the fingers in heaven touching or almost touching, and it was just the hands. It was I guess the Michelangelo thing or whatever, and we just took the two. And again, it was a quick thought. It wasn't a super deep thing, but we just took the two fingers, had it like this, and took a lyric of Brett's. And it was funny to see people's sort of interpretation. Like we didn't, they would just come up with their own interpretation. A lot of it made sense, and saying this, not this. And it was fascinating. Religious overtones and that sort of stuff. So it's like, and again, we got too much credit. Like we just like having fun with a lot of bands and people that we would run into and meet, and we didn't have any kind of, to our credit and to our, what helped us but eventually probably hurt us. We just didn't have that sort of focus where we were so intent on something. We just kind of, did our thing.
Yeah. Now, early tours. When you guys went on your first couple tours, did you have a sister band that you went with, or was it kind of just you guys went on your own touring and just went?
We usually basically went on our own touring for the most part, but there were a lot of times that we would kind of latch on with somebody or meet up with somebody. I mean, early on there were a lot of bands that we would maybe even not touring, but we would do a string of shows or whatever. But like Darkest Hour was a band that we were around lot in the early days when they had like a demo or two, and
Yeah.
super cool guys. Always enjoyed playing with those guys, again, I'm mentioning Next Step Up and local bands and stuff like that, and then eventually kind of um, branching out and getting a little further away. I know Brothers Keeper was a band we played with a ton back in the day. That we loved Erie. We go up to play Erie, or we run into them in some capacity, but like bands like those and just Turmoil's another one that I can think of that we eventually ended up playing with a ton. And we would just sort of kind of get on these like sort of strings with various bands. And um, I know I mentioned Harvest and Disembodied was another one. We tried playing with a bunch. I know that one show we tried playing with them fell through in Baltimore, but yeah, top of my head, I can't think of any any long touring routes with bands other than like a Brothers Keeper, Turmoil, and Next Step Up, and bands like that.
Now, I wanted to ask you too about when you went on tour in the early days. Was there any bands that surprised you that you didn't know about that you saw when you played on a bill and you were like, holy shit, this band is amazing, and didn't know anything about them, and you kind of wowed you at that time? I know it's hard to remember back then, but I mean, some things, catch you.
Well, I do remember really liking. I mean, speaking of Turmoil, I do remember. I think we played a festival in Wilkes-Barre or Scranton, somewhere up in that neck of the woods, and there were a ton of bands. And I remember those guys getting up there and just the sound. They had full stacks. They're very tight, and that rhythm thing. They're really good at that. They just had this great groove to them, and band from around here that everybody likes, Clutch. They're chuck full of groove. So I mean, there was a heavy Clutch influence as well.
Yeah.
So it's hard to do. I think it's one thing to be spastic and all that stuff, but I mean to keep like a simple groove and make it interesting. I think that's more impressive than me. So I think like. Turmoil did that, like the sound. They had the full stacks, these huge guitars, and just this aggression, but it wasn't angry. It was just this powerful sort of sound coming from this group of people, and that was impressive to me. I did like um, Bloodlet a lot. I was a huge Bloodlet fan. Into Another was a really fun band to watch live. Neurosis blew my mind. Through Silver and Blood came out, and I saw them in a small club, and I was very thankful that I was very sober, and but I did thing in general. But it was like you didn't need to do drugs because the visuals and all. I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, there, a lot of. I'm trying to think. It's a good question. I'd say Turmoil is one of the first ones that comes to mind, but we just saw so many good bands. The years that I mean, VOD was of course they were really powerful live. Excessive Force was really powerful live. Trying to think, yeah, no, off the top of my head, there was sometimes it was impressive to see those bands that really. Oh, Abnegation. Abnegation, who's I think they're getting back together. They're doing some stuff now. I see them on social media and stuff. But those were always great guys to get. We'd fall in with those guys. And after I talk to you with this podcast, I'm gonna be all night. I'm gonna be popping up with bands that oh guys, oh shit. But yeah, they were great. They were awesome to see. I mean, but what I was going to say too, sometimes some bands that weren't big, that weren't like you go play a show and you'd see like we play with an Abnegation or Brothers Keeper, bands that were established that we knew, and then there might be a band that's either opening or a band that's like right before us or whatever, and it was they didn't you didn't know who they were, but they were just awesome.
Yeah.
Those would pop up a lot. I kind of wish my 46-year-old self had enough memory to sort of remember a lot of that stuff and who they were. But I do remember that happening quite a bit too. That I can think of.
Yeah, Abnegation is playing a fest this coming weekend with Zayo and Race Trader
Okay.
and Sect, Chris Colahan's band, for members of like Earth Crisis, and he was in Left 4 Dead in the Swarm. And that fest is going to be in Pittsburgh this weekend, so it should be um,
That's gonna be awesome.
pretty epic with the Abnegation getting back together and playing like the old stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, no, those guys are crazy. Those guys are vicious live for sure. I mean, they were very brutal. Just one of those bands you didn't like playing after because you kind of felt like you're playing in slow motion. But good guys, really,
You
really.
you were talking about Darkest Hour too, and I always talk about Misanthrope, the first CD that they put out. It's not talked about hardly ever, but I saw them with Fall Silent up in Rochester, New Hampshire, way back in the day, and they just had that out. And that CD, I love that CD so much, and not a lot of people talk about it or even know about it, honestly.
No, I when Torn Apart broke up, I took a couple of years off. You know, I got really heavily into started getting into audio engineering at that point, and got burnt out, and just I've got a brother 7 years younger who was still keeping. He showed up one day and he's like, check this thing out, and it's Converge Jane Doe, and I'm like,
Mm.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right. And then and he's like, yeah, Darkest Hour is this and that. He's so I'm kind of keeping tabs on Darkest Hour, and then um, uh, Peter, guitar player, he's not in it anymore, but very nice guy. Peter from Soilwork, Swedish uh, um, metal band that came in to produce one of Darkest Hour's records, and Peter had done a lot of work through Soilwork and stuff like that at the studio where I work in Baltimore. So the guys from Darkest Hour showed up, and I hadn't seen them in ages, and it blew my mind. I was like, wow, you guys are just so like you're still doing it, working hard, and just huge. I mean, it was amazing because again, we had a demo in a 7 inch. They had a demo in a 7 inch kind of thing. I mean, it was. I listened to their demo a ton. It was
Yeah.
sludgy, way different than what they do now. What they do now is great, but back then they just had this like real doomy, sludgy sound, and it translated really well live too. For me, I'd seen them live, and just I when I think of Darkest Hour, I think of like the just lights going off and just having this like doomy sort of just
Yeah.
dirty thing.
I
So
I agree too. And you were speaking of VOD too about the demo when they just had the demo out. I think personally for me, I'm 50 years old, so I'm always I always resonate towards like the first things I hear that catch me, that I'm like, wow, this stuff is really good. And I I know it sounds bad, but I think the demo is probably my favorite VOD thing that they ever put out, because I think after that the sound kind of got polished a little bit, and it took away from the rawness of them. But that first demo is like amazing stuff.
yeah, I agree. I think and again, doing what I do in audio engineering, like I work with all sorts of projects, but I do heavy stuff. I'll have to send you something I did that's on the heavier end of things. This band called Asthma Castle. Um, it's got the drummer from Misery Index in it. It's killer, like just doom rock, kind of fun rock. I don't know, like bro rock they would call it. Like they're some funny individuals, but heavy stuff. But I um, uh, I I don't know. Like I think I do the same thing with bands to try and get this rawness. And I think with the BOD demo, like a lot of people would say back then, it's funny, they would say how much they loved it, but they'd criticize it. Not criticize it, but they'd always point out how you could hear Tim's breathing.
Mm.
And the thing, he'd be like, oh, 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 you could, but
Yeah.
it was like, I think what people didn't understand or didn't really fully understand is that it was very clear that the guy went in there with a mic and just belted out these vocals. And I take a band like that and you put a lot of money into it and fancy equipment, you get rid of that. So yeah, I was let down definitely by the first Roadrunner release. I think Imprint, they I think Imprint's the next best thing to the demo that
Mm.
they, and like sonically, it has a nice grit to it and it sounds angry. And that's the other thing. Like the thing with them is they're supposed to kind of sound like they're falling off the rails a little bit in a good way, you know, like just that anger. It's things are about to explode, and I think all that studio production just sort of killed that. You know, after the fact, I agree. I mean, their 7 inches were good after the demo too.
Yeah, yeah.
Some of that stuff was really, really good, and it just had this. You know, for me personally, I was a huge Alice in Chains fan, and it had this kind of like wonderful sort of connection between what I was listening to, like your Bloodlets and Integrities and stuff like that in hardcore, and I'm also still in the, you know, heavily influenced by like Alice in Chains and stuff like that. So, you know, I really was a huge VOD fan early on, and I agree that demo was killer.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the weird thing about hardcore, and I think you put too much money behind it, it ruins it.
Yeah.
Possibly. I don't always think that the punk rock way is the right way, but I think that, you know, just, you know, there are other bands I can think of off the top of my head easily that just I would kill. I'd call them up, be like, you guys come on in, let me either remix what you have or let's re-record something and just kind of capture. You know, Turmoil was one of them that from Bleeding Hands, like that they got screwed, I think, on that recording.
Mm.
Whoever engineered that record did a terrible job and screwed those guys. Like I mean, I loved it so much because I could hear it live when, you know, I could see it, picture it live. But they were such a good live, loud band, and the recording was just so like meh. And to be honest, I kind of felt the same way about my band. I feel like that's part of the reason why we may not have translated or resonated with people nowadays, because I don't feel like we ever really kind of were disciplined enough in the studio. I think we were not rushing, but I think we just kind of didn't either take it serious enough or really kind of have enough. Because again, it's my first band, and I think most other guys in the band too.
Yeah, but what recording do you think kind of was off on in the Torn Apart catalog?
For who?
For the Torn Apart catalog, what do you feel is off recorded wise, like that you guys put out?
Well, it's not that it's bad. I just feel like it never. We never. I think we. I always like thicker and warmer stuff, and stuff with a little bit of teeth. And I always felt like they sounded a little maybe on the thinner side, and kind of. They're all recorded on ADAT too, for the most part, which is a very terrible medium. It's long gone. Hopefully, I haven't heard about it in a very long time. But I mean, it's bad, and it just. I think. I think that they're not bad, but it's just they don't have a lot of depth to them and stuff. And I have a lot of the original tapes and everything. I archived them at where I work and listening. Yeah. Drew did a great job with us, Drew Mazurek, who recorded us, but I think you got bands like Cave In and Converge. They're used to, you know, I think like there are other scenes that kind of like you learn from other bands, and we just sort of went in there cold. And Drew was more of a rock guy, and you know he's not so much a hardcore guy. And I think like you know we got a distorted guitar and a bass and you know drum sounds, and there's no like I'm saying it needed to be produced, but there's some element of like, you know, dig into it a little bit more, play it a little angrier, you know. I think because live, like we would flick the switch and you know go nuts. But I think in the studio, because we were a laid back band, I mean, we were generally pretty low. You know, we didn't drink, we didn't smoke, we didn't really party. Like we didn't, you know, we weren't like super spastic. We weren't problematic. We didn't need to destroy stuff. We're boring. and I think that kind of came across the studio. We're in the studio just hanging out and playing our parts and you know and not that we phoned it in, but I think it's somebody had been there and done the whole Ross Robinson thing and thrown a chair at us or something like that and got us a little bit into character a little bit more. I'd be curious as to what those recordings would sound like, you know, because I feel like we were a live band.
Yeah.
Studio it just didn't fully, in my mind, it didn't fully translate as well as it could have, I think. But then again, who knows? But there's a possibility I might never have been happy with anything we recorded. So who knows?
No, what is your favorite recording that you put out and torn apart? Personally, your personal favorite.
I think we got it right on the 59 session. I think that's the I think that's the one. The 7-inch we did before that was really good.
Mm.
That Nothing is Permanent is a really popular fan favorite, and I think that was well done too. But I think that fell into place. Whereas I feel like the 59 session was a little bit more planned. I think we were a little bit more in control and kind of like what we're doing. Where I think Nothing is Permanent is more of it's our first album, and we're we wrote those songs and then just we're done writing the songs, and we went in and recorded. Luckily, we practiced them through shows and that sort of thing. But with the 59 session, I think we were a little bit more militant about practicing and being prepared in the studio. And then unfortunately, which is a whole nother story, very boring story, is the last thing that we did, which was just thrown together. I think the band's falling apart. We didn't fully know it, and we're just sort of piecemealing an album, and we're thinking like, and I've seen this, I think most bands make the mistake of thinking that touring and going in the studio will help congeal and kind of fix everything, whereas
Mm.
it's a mirror, and it will basically weed you out. So if you go in the studio or you go on the road, you'll find out really fast, different aspects, whether or not, it's for you. And I think with the last album we did, um, we went to Brian McTernan. I don't think he really knew what to do with us either, because we didn't know what to do with ourselves. We weren't really in a good headspace. I recorded the whole record myself. Mike wasn't, Mike had kind of tapped out at that point, and
Yeah.
he was doing his life and that sort of stuff. And Brett and I think had been in the band the longest at that point. And we were burnt out, and it wasn't a good experience. I listened back to it, and it's clear, listening to it, it's parts. It's just parts of parts of songs. And whereas I listened to the 59 session, and there's a clear, like, how we individually put the songs together and how we put the songs together as a whole. And the vibe was much better. And also that was the last of the time where it used to be weird to me that not everybody in the band would try and make a solid effort to be in the studio at all times. Like that's, and it wasn't a rule. It was just because I'm thinking I want to be there. It doesn't matter if I'm recording or not. Like if Drew's recording his parts, Brett's recording his parts, like I'm on the couch,
Mm-hmm.
quiet, whatever. But I'm thinking, why would you not want to be here?
Yeah.
Whatever. And, I think 59 sessions was the last of that, where we're still kind of collectively doing something. I think after that, it just sort of just phoning in kind of thing.
What was the overall reception of the 10 songs album, though? Because, I mean, a lot of people, up here, they weren't in love with it, but they still thought it was a solid album. I mean, overall, what was the reception from everybody when you put that out?
Yeah, pretty much that. I think it's funny because the 59 session, we went in and we did that, and I think once that was recorded and we played some shows, it wasn't too long, if my memory's right, that we broke up for a little while after the 59 session. Got back together. Drew didn't come back, so we got Jeremy on bass, and we did a chunk of time we're playing shows, and kind of like, I think the 59 session was, had been out, so we're like playing those songs plus maybe a new tune or 2 or 3 new tunes that we're working on, kind of thing. But inevitably thinking we're going to go and record at some point. But I think it was just this gradual sort of decline. And then by the time the album, we're thinking about going in to do the album, we weren't. It was just desperation or grasping, and it's clear. And then to your point, to your question, same thing happened like with 59 session. Same thing happened with our last album, where we we broke up not too long after it was put out to, I think, not push it, not get any kind of feedback. And like I was saying earlier, it's too, how it's, you don't get any social media. This is back before there's like instant. Now it's like, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. You put something out and it's like you get so much. Whereas back then, to this day, like hearing about you guys up there listening to us, it's still fascinating to me, and it's an honor, like having, because this is word of mouth days. This isn't
Yeah.
Spotify or internet or Facebook or MySpace or whatever it is, YouTube, any quick way of getting around. So I think any kind of response was usually that kind of response was sort of a lukewarm, but it was almost like didn't have to be said. It wasn't like, hey, what do you guys think? Like it was pretty clear that I wasn't into it from the get-go, so they didn't probably feel the need to be like, yeah, it's not that good, so
Yeah.
Whereas 59 Session, we would definitely get more positive feedback and that sort of stuff throughout the years. I think that always seems to be the more pop that, and nothing is permanent, I guess. But I think it's just dependent on it's like most bands, depending on when you get into them sometimes, and maybe that time of your life that you got into it, maybe it hit you at the right moment or something. So
yeah. Now when did this album get reissued with the 7-inch songs and the main recording from the radio show? When did that happen? Was that like early 2000s that happened?
I think so. Is that on Life Sentence?
It is on Life Sentence, but I think another record company help with this? Like, was it Temperance Records that helped?
It was either, I don't know if it was that or was it Good Life or I can't remember, but I had heard through the grapevine, but I think this was after the band broke up. Heard through the grapevine that it got released, or I saw it, or somebody showed it to me. But again, with the band, like we didn't sign anything. We were so young, and we had mild success, but not quite enough to where it's like any kind of money or anything like that. So I think it just came out, and we were all kind of like, cool. Like, all right, if people are still into it, great. And to this day, if people are into it, I'm more of the mindset of like I'm thankful, that people are still into it, because I've we worked hard and had a lot of fun doing it, but at the same time, it's 20 odd years after the band broke up, and so I don't know. I don't know if there was any kind of official. I mean, like we were always friendly with Life Sentence, but after we got on to Ferret, we really had no contact with them. Specifically Dan, who's basically Life Sentence.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if it was just a reissue and they put it out. But I have no idea how many, when it was put out, how many were pressed or any of that sort of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad that they did repress this, because like I said, you have the 7-inch songs on here, and you have the live radio show from Maine. And if anybody hasn't heard this, I mean, this is worth finding. If you can't find it in a record store, go to Discogs or something and try to find this, because the radio show itself sounds great too. I mean, the recording sounds really, really good on that too, and it shows off Torn Apart's rawness, almost in a, obviously it's a live aspect of the band and stuff like that. And it's fun listening to the band you're playing with at the show the next day, because Brett's like, oh, I don't want to get too tired, so this will be our last song, and we're playing with, Rare Form and Polyglot and tomorrow in Maine at Zoots. I think you guys were playing at.
Maine was such a pleasant surprise. I think and again, I'm foggy on some stuff, but I do remember something to the effect of we were supposed to play in maybe Massachusetts or Boston or something, that we maybe had an idea that was, you think of Boston down where we are, it's like, oh, cool, we're going to play Boston. And something fell through, and contacts or whatever, like, oh, we got you a show in Freeport, Maine. And we were like, that's in the U.S., like there's going to be like 3 people there, and a moose. And we were like, we don't know what to expect. And we get up there, and we played this place called Zoots, and Ian from Polyglot was there. I mean, I remember vividly, and and it was one of the best shows on that leg that we did, and like it was from the amount of people that showed up to just the character of everybody and the bands, just it was such a great experience. We went up to Maine so many times. I mean, Drew, our bass player, dated a girl he met at that show.
Oh no.
Here, she ended up coming down here to go to an art school down here in Baltimore, and they dated for a while. But so we'd go up there and stay at her parents' house and play a show, and loved it, absolutely loved Portland and Freeport. Great places.
Yeah, I remember seeing. Well, we were talking about this too. The flyer that I made for the New Year's show with the Enkindles and Torn Apart, and at Joel's house.
Yeah.
And you had pictures of that, which blew me away because I was like, I remember that show pretty vividly, and it's awesome to see pictures of that. And my remembrance of that show is just like kind of like a barnish type house, and you'd have to walk up these stairs into that room to get to where you would see the bands play, which is it was just such a weird place. But
was this a place where they had, and I could be messing things up, my memories get weird. Was this a place where were his parents there?
Yes.
Was like Jeopardy downstairs or something?
Oh, I can't remember.
like hi Mrs. So-and-so, hi Mr. So-and-so, and they're like watching Wheel of Fortune, and we're going to go upstairs and like destroy the second story, like carrying full stacks and all this stuff. And it's like, it just was so surreal. I remember that everything was frozen, I think too. It was like super cold. And the Kindles, like another band that we would run, we'd sound nothing like those guys. Like, never, like being on a bill with those guys was weird, but we were a bunch, and always had a good time with those guys. Those guys were super cool and nice, and another example of that. But that show was like, I remember Tomb Raider was on, I think PlayStation or
on the side of the.
Yeah, I think it was I don't know if PlayStation was out yet or not, but maybe it was. But Tomb Raider was being played. I think Brett, because I talked to Brett and Drew recently, and I think one of them said something about a Guns N' Roses or some logo or something on the floor. I forget what it was.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think it was Guns N' Roses. That's right.
He's like, was that the one with the Guns N' Roses? I was like, oh my God, I don't remember that.
It was on the floor.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow, that's some good memory right there.
Yeah. Better than mine.
Yeah, mine's real foggy too. And the other show that I saw Torn Apart was the last show at Cafe Savoy in Manchester with Harvest and Hold Strong, and I think Fault played that show as well. Some of the hometown bands from around here.
What do you remember anything about that venue? Like, what did
kind of like that venue was just almost in like a strip mall type of, like, it was very weird place. It had like stores. It was like almost like a rinky-dink strip mall, but inside was where they'd have shows.
Huh. Yeah, I don't remember. I remember playing one place with Harvest, because that was around the time we were talking to Josh from Trustkill, and I think Carl from Ferret were there, and it was like a I don't know, it was a VFW hall or something, but it had like the main place where everybody was playing, and then it had like where you almost come into like get candy and all that sort of stuff, reception area, but it had like PA speakers, and I think they had the singer singing through the PA system. So if you went into that room, you're just getting blasted with just the guy screaming in the just tables eating, a veggie wrap or whatever, and somebody's just screaming through these like school type PAs up on the walls and stuff. It was pretty funny. I don't remember where that was, but.
I wanted to ask you, after Torn Apart happened, you didn't join any other bands? I know we talked, about Turmoil, because one of your friends had asked if you and the drummer from Torn Apart got asked to play in Turmoil for a little bit. But did you play in any other bands after that?
I would have some friends, like my brother plays drums. He played in a band, and I recording them, and it was natural for my brother and I. We would write a bunch of songs, and and I had some friends that played friends that played drums over the years that I would jam with. But I think because of, you know, being in audio engineering for the last 20 odd years, like I kind of, it just took a back seat to it, and then to that, and then in 2016 when my wife gave birth to our son, you know, even the studio stuff took a slow down a bit too, and so he's 6 now, so I've been kind of speeding that back up a little bit, and in the process of I've actually been playing with a couple of guys and jamming some stuff here and there, but with the idea, I've been working in the studio for 20 years, and I would kill to record my own stuff. So I think I kind of know how to do it now. So
Yeah.
I'd love to do it. And but you know, in the interim, I'm just like I've always been. I'm just kind of a little bit more in the moment than I should be. I do plan and do things, but I think it's just if it's meant to be, it's meant to be, and if it happens, great. But I never really kind of officially did anything with anybody else. Like I said, the closest I got was with Turmoil, because there maybe we played with them so many, probably the most of any other band was probably Turmoil. There's a string of years there, I feel like, or a while, we were playing a lot of shows with those guys. And I knew, I mean, after a certain point, I feel like there were a couple of jokes, I think, with some of the shows one time where, you know, one of the guitar players was late or whatever, and they just kind of like look at me, and I know, like 4, 5, you know, but I think when I don't know if it was when Torn Apart was broke up, or but it was towards like the last couple of years where I was talking to those guys, and they were, you know, being from Philly, not too far away, they were down a guitar player and a drummer, and they basically were talking to Aaron and I, and Aaron, I think Aaron either had a child or child on the way, and was kind of, life was happening with him, so I think that sort of factored into it a little bit. And he wasn't, of all of us, he wasn't the closest with Turmoil. I think like we had played with him a bunch with Devin, and then when Aaron came in, we played with him too. But I think I was closer to those guys, excuse me, than Aaron was. And I think it just came down to it where we were going to go to Europe with him. It was the first thing we do is this long European tour, and I think Aaron was kind of like, I can't. And then
Yeah.
I was on the fence. I was thinking, well, if Aaron's out, you know, I don't know, because I wasn't sure what they were going to do. And quite honestly, I don't know if they lasted too much longer after that. I know they got back together and stuff like that, but I think it was just one of those things where I was just, my gut was like, I would kill to do it. I mean, being over in Europe with Turmoil was awesome. It was such a bummer for me, but at the same time, I think I was at a point in my life too where I was sort of figuring things out, what I wanted to do, and that sort of thing.
Now, how did the producing and engineering thing happen for you? And obviously, it's lasted a long time, and it's something you love. What kind of got you into that and steered you towards that direction?
I've always loved. I think that's part of the reason why I got into metal and hardcore, because I love the sound of things. It wasn't so much that it was, you know, I have a short attention span. If I read, it's periodicals, magazines, articles, those sorts of things. I just don't have a good attention span. So, you know, lyrics, I've just never been one to gravitate to lyrics. So I think sounds, and I've always liked, you know, my dad's heavily into music. I grew up with a music room where it was just a room with a stereo, all his records and CDs and tapes, and a chair, and that's it. And it was like a Maxell commercial or something, and it was just, that was it. And you would go down there, and this is obviously, again, pre-internet, so you couldn't go down there and surf or anything like that. You just go down there and just put on whatever. And I would make mixtapes of his stuff, my dad's stuff, and go through all the old, you know, albums from the 60s and 70s, and would just really get immersed in just sounds and things. So that's why now I don't do a lot of pop. I don't do a lot of hip hop anymore. I'm not in the hip hop last like 10 years. I grew up listening to a ton of it, but it's just a lot of the pop music and hip hop music now, and modern country are just all sort of similar. It's just very cookie cutter and not my thing. Like I'm doing like more weirder stuff, or stuff that's maybe not the most marketable, but it's still cool, or like I said, the Asthma Castle stuff is a little bit more doom rocky. But I got into it, not to stray too much, but I got into it again. I think partially because, like I said earlier, like I wasn't really. I kind of felt like man, it'd be nice to sort of sound like this a little bit more when I was in Torn Apart. And both Mike and I, the guitar players, went to recording school while we were recording 59 Session. And I even remember being in the studio for 59 Session, and Drew, the engineer, was kind of like, "You guys want to plug in a mic? You know how to do that? You know, all this stuff." And we're sort of figuring it out. But that's what got me into it, I think. And I almost, in a way, like producing because it gives me, I didn't have that, growing up or kind of growing up musically. So now, like when I'm with bands, I'm kind of asking them questions I think they need to ask themselves, and I'm not so much of a go in and like, I've got X amount of experience. This is what you should do. I've got all the answers. It's more of like, hey, this is how you approach it. This is you should be thinking about this. You should be thinking about that. And, why I think the way I do, not just giving answers or just telling them what to do, producing, if you will.
Yeah. Because you've worked with Misery Index and Dying Fetus and other bands like that. So I mean, how was that experience for you? Like real heavy music. Do you like that better than, say softer indie music, or what do you like to work with the most? Like
probably stuff. My wheelhouse is, and this is stuff I've listened to for a very long time, anywhere from the heavier stuff, of course, like the heavier rocky stuff from your Clutch, Queens of the Stone Age, to your Misery Index and Dying Fetus. Though those types of bands that's a lot of work. Like in the heavy world, like if you like a band like Converge or a band like Misery Index are a lot of work, because there's a lot of crafting that goes into it, both from the band and from the engineer. There's a lot of work. Those guys work their asses off to get the Converge. It sounds like they just go in and it's got this sloppy sort of punk rock metal kind of sound, but tremendous amount of work goes into crafting that sound. Much like Misery Index, they kind of have this Napalm Death sound, a grimy sound, and it's just, those guys work really hard at what they do. Dying Fetus as well. There's incredible technicians and really, really cool guys. And I think from working with that kind of stuff, that's definitely my wheelhouse. But I also really like stuff like Radiohead or Bjork or Off the Wall. Again, with groove, that's why like a Radiohead or a Bjork or Massive Attack. Mezzanine is an album I was listening to the other day. It's an old record, like some of the electronica stuff, which are fairly certain guys like Bloodlet or something like that would listen to. I remember running into bands. It's what I would ask them, like, what do you guys listen to? What's your secret ingredient? Because a lot of the bands, I can kind of tell what they listen to. They sort of sound like what they listen to, but bands like Bloodlet and bands like Dead Guy, and like what I love to see would make those bands tick. And the guys in Bloodlet would listen to like trip hop or something like that, and I'd be like, oh, okay, it totally makes sense. So I like doing all sorts of stuff. I mean, really, like I said, like I can stomach pop music. I love hip hop if it's good.
yeah.
In modern country, I can't stomach. I don't know what it is. I can't do it. It either makes me laugh or it makes me ill. But guys, like I love doing it all. So I do like a challenge. I mean, I like I've got guys that will come in and bring just soundscapes, like Philip Glass kind of stuff, where it's just noise, and and I love that stuff.
Yeah, I'm with you too. With country music, I can't stand anything past like 1980 on.
Yeah,
And I like the outlaw country stuff
bluegrass is killer.
From 50 to like 79. I can deal with any of that stuff, but after that, and hip hop as well. I'm a huge 90s like boom bap style hip hop guy. It's got to hit me with lyrics and beats and this drumless beat bullshit that's happening now too, that like rappers are rapping over drumless beats. I can't wrap my head around it.
Well, what it is and I don't work with it a lot these days. But I think some of that is and it's in hip hop there's not a lot of marrying between the beat and the vocal. So it's, you have a set of lyrics or a story or whatever it is that you want to tell, and you just, from as soon as the song starts, You've got X amount of time, and you just go through it. And there's no kind of marriage of the two. You know, it just
Yeah.
you read over top of it. You know, and there's no distinctive sort of catch to it. It's on to the next, and it's kind of just to do it. And there's no like you know, like you said, the stuff that I feel like we grew up on. And again, it's coming from someone, like I said, I'm not into lyrics, and I could care less if you have a message or not. Sometimes, like if the music's good, you've got me. You know,
Yeah.
the music's kind of mediocre, but you got something great to say. It might not be for me. It's not that I don't like it, but now it's like if I'm the one complaining about how sort of bland the message is, or sort of how lack of a like content there is, then that's bad. You know, I, bland stuff, but it's just not a lot of substance to it, not a lot of depth. You know, and the other thing I don't like is rules. I remember a lot of artists I work with in hip hop are ones that I just wouldn't work with after a while, not on purpose or anything. Just would I found that like they wouldn't want to. There are rules, these like rules they had to abide by. They couldn't do this, they couldn't do that. Even and I want to do this, I'm like, oh, do it. And they'd be like, no, no, no. I'm like, what? Do something different, you know? Like put yourself above everybody else. You know, don't just be like everybody else. So, but there's a fear, and I kind of get it. There's a fear. It's pop music, kind of the same way. You know, you got to kind of what everybody's doing, and you know, I want to sound like so and so, and all this stuff. It's just not for me. I'm more into like let's go into the lab and create what we sort of create, and whatever happens. I think that's much more interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And I usually do a rapid fire at the end of these talks that I do, but I wanted to ask about the Dan Gump recording at the end of the Nothing is Permanent LP. Whose idea was that, and how did that come about? And also, the second part is, did you guys get called Born to Fart a lot after that CD?
uh, no, funny thing is I think that kind of got much like other things. I think that kind of got bigger, like as time went, or people didn't. I also think I don't know if people really knew. I think for a while, people I don't know if they really knew what to make of it. Like I don't know if people knew it was us, or if we had a friend or whatever it was. But honestly, I think I mean obviously it's Brett, the singer, and I'll give him full credit, for the idea, I guess. But we were. Because he did it. But we used to listen to a ton of Jerky Boys, as I'm sure everybody did back in the day.
Yeah.
Actually, do a lot of stuff in band practice, where we would call places and prank and all that stuff, as I'm sure most people did. Nothing like crazy or anything, but I vividly remember we were in the studio recording that Nothing is Permanent.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know whose idea it was, but I'm just saying it's a collective idea that just we were like, let's call Dan and and there was no. I do remember we're sitting at the dining room table at Devin's house. We were practice, and at his parents' house, and just eating Captain Crunch or something, and just sitting there, and like I almost kind of feel like I can hear the birds in the phone call or whatever when we're sitting there, but like outside because we were sitting close to the sliding glass door. But it was just like that. I mean, we just called them, and I think it was all on the spot, and I almost. It got cut short because we were all just like, it's enough, because we could have just kept them going. Brett was like, I didn't think he was like, all right, I'm gone, or whatever he says at the end, I'm done. But the Born to Fart thing, like no one ever said it. Again, I think like nobody ever. I don't know. I just don't think they knew what to make of us. Like in that sense, like we know people, but they never knew. Like, cause I don't know. Um, uh, I mean, for one thing you're probably not going to ask too, 59 session. Why the 59 session? Well, it's and I could be wrong. I'm fairly 99% sure it's 59 at the last song where we play. There's a long stretch of just hi-hat counts, 59 of them to be exact, and that's it. So like, what are we going to call the EP? And for whatever reason, we figured because it was like a joke that we were like, we used to like do a 4 count or something and go into that part. But the idea was just go a ridiculous length Brett even had like a and all this stuff. He was in the booth and like recorded stuff, and I wanted to keep it in, but they're like, no, 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 no. So like we just let it go for a while, and I guess we somewhere along the line we wanted to know how many hi-hats we hit, and because it was just random, and it was 59 hi-hats, and then just like it was we wanted to call it sessions or something like that, so it was 59 sessions. So it's again tribute to how incredibly deep we were. So I think that yeah, I just think people just didn't. I think they just kind of had an idea of what we were, but not a lot of people. I guess not a lot of people talked about us to us, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, yeah. All right. I don't want to hold you up too long, so I'll get into this rapid fire with you. My first question always is all-time favorite New England punk hardcore band for you from New England.
Uh, that's tough. Can you give me some names?
Well, I mean, a lot of people say Converge, Cave In, SSD, some Slapshot, some people say Daughters, some, it's all Orchid, it's all over the board.
I mean, yeah, it's gonna have to be a toss-up between Cave In and Converge. I mean, because it's 50-50 between those two. I mean, the Saddest Day with Converge and that 7-inch they put out, that like Dillinger Escape Plan. I'll keep this short. Dillinger Escape Plan, Cave In, and Converge were the three bands that I think we used to walk in the shows not thinking we were the best, but we felt pretty confident. We had like loud gear, we could turn up, and we would go nuts and swinging our guitars, put on our show. Those three bands, I think, not immediately, but I think like we're the ones who were like, I just put my guitar in the case and just wanted to leave it there. I was like, all right, they're on another level. Like they're just kind of like, all right, you guys are and listening to that stuff. It just, I think Cave In and Converge. I think Converge for how like kind of crazy they were, and Cave In for how ballsy they were to sort of like branch out into different sounds and that sort of thing. I think took a lot of balls. So both those bands definitely. I mean, Until Your Heart Stops was on massive rotation, in my world for quite a while for sure.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree. My second question, what was the first punk hardcore show you attended? Like real hardcore show? The first one.
Uh,
Not with the bands type thing, but like a real first hardcore show for you.
I my guess my guess is Next Step Up, 25 to Life, and Sheer Terror in DC. I'm guessing. I think that's what it is. Sheer Terror sounded amazing. Like
Hmm.
it sounded amazing. 25 to Life was, I mean, Next Step Up, I seen him practice, and I think that might have been the first time I've seen him in a show. And then 25 Life, they hadn't been a band very long, and Rick was incredibly drunk and threatening, like not like in a scary way, but was like really different. He became, very into Youth Crew and all that sort of stuff. But this is early on where he's like, "Don't come up to me, and if you're my friend and all this stuff, I'll shoot you." And all. I mean, he's just like super drunk, and it was like
Yeah.
he was like a cartoon. I mean, like in a semi-scary way. So it was pretty interesting. But um, I think that's probably the first one I think of. I went to a lot of shows at the Safari Club too, which I mean, I rattle on, Course Disapproval, Integrity, Chokehold, Bloodlet, Battery, Damnation. I mean, all these bands that, Hatebreed. I remember Hatebreed coming. There's a band called Hatebreed that has a demo, and that's it. And they're coming in, wheeling in their gear and stuff. I mean, it was pretty crazy. Those are early shows that I'm going to too. I
Yeah.
mean,
Under the Knife is my favorite thing that Hatebreed ever put out. So, like I said, first thing that I hear, I'm always.
you take that, if you polish it up too much, you can make it sound big, and yeah, you can, but they're another great example. Those demos were they just sounded like they were coming through the tape. You had that cassette tape, and it just sounded alive for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I'll keep going. My next question, what was your all-time favorite show that you played live that meant something to you, that really meant something?
Wow. I don't think I have favorite shows and experiences, but I think to me, like, I okay, I do remember we played Erie. I don't remember where, but we played a show in Erie, and we had Nothing Is Permanent in boxes, and I don't think it was being distributed yet. So we were just starting to get out, I think, and like and it might have been even have been the first show that we had that. I'm pretty sure. And like we went up there, and a ton of people were there, and they were super into it. And I think, and we like, I think we had to take CDs out to the van and hide them because we needed more for other shows. We could have sold them all out that night, and like
Yeah.
that was. And I hadn't thought about that in a very long time. That was probably one of the first times that I remember we were all kind of thinking like, okay, we might be onto a little something here. You know, there's definitely some interest here. You know, and Erie was like Maine. You know, much like Freeport, Portland. Erie was just an amazing place for us. I mean, we played there numerous times. Incredible friends we made there, and just great experiences. Tons of great shows and stuff. So that was an amazing place. But you know, that was a killer show for sure.
Nice. That sounds awesome. My next question: what was your all-time favorite hardcore punk show you attended that you didn't play? That you went to a hardcore show and was your favorite hardcore show you saw?
Probably probably back. I'm probably meshing them up a bit, but probably one of the Safari Club shows. Those were some of my favorite shows. Like it was such a damp, you're not supposed to be here kind of place in a part of the city you're not supposed to be in, and hanging out with people that you really like get along with, and sort of again that resonating factor that just, you know, you almost don't have to like talk. You just being with these people, there's this sort of comfort factor, and there was a cool vibe there. A couple of shows there, like I said, you know, there was Bloodlet and Integrity and Chokehold and just these big band 108. A bunch of those shows just had these monster lists from time to time back then, and they really put on some good shows. But I think after that it was me again. I bring up Turmoil a lot, but after that it was probably like there was a house show that we played with Turmoil one time in Virginia or North Carolina or something that was just awesome. I mean, it was in the middle of the house and just destroyed it. And those are probably the house show we're talking about. You know, you said Dan's house. Right?
Joel's house.
What's that?
Joel's house.
Joel's house. Yes. Joel's house. Yeah. Like those are the shows. You know, those are the ones that were always the best ones. You know, like there was times we played in Philly where we would, I forget, there was a warehouse type of place where we would play like in the middle of the room, and we'd have a lamp, you know, this big in front of the kick drum, and every light would go off except for that, and just everybody's around us, and that sort of stuff was always a lot of fun. So, and one last thing is always memorable is we broke down one time in Nevada and got towed about 80 miles to LA to play the showcase, and with 18 Visions, and nobody ever, they were like, it was probably their first year around. I mean, they were super young, and
yeah.
We got towed out there. We're in our van, and we're out in the middle of nowhere in a Del Taco, and the tow truck shows up, and it's a flatbed, and there's 5 of us, so we draw straws to see who would hide in the van. So Mike and Devin had to sit in the cab. Brett, Drew, and I got to like sit in the van, which is not the safest thing in the world, but sitting in the van, pretending like we're driving on the top of this thing. Guy pulls us up to the show, back in, and we made it there in time and everything, and played the show and all that stuff. But we got towed to the show, and that was a fun show. That was a lot of fun out there too.
I remember 18 Visions back then when people first were talking about 18 Visions. They were saying, oh, they're such a crazy militant vegan like hardcore band. Like in the very beginning of 18 Visions, they were saying that. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I don't want to get in trouble, but I'll just say that there was Hardline. Then and I don't. I never quite understood the hardline thing, but like some of them were hardline, some of them were vegan. There was some like goth kind of thing going on, but I think like much like any band, I think they were just going through a lot of. They're one of the bigger surprises to me how big they got, because they were nice to us, but I think because we were so much older than they were, had kind of not, we'd been around for a little while, so and they were into us, trying to get on life sentence and all that sort of thing. So it was a kind of a skewed relationship.
Yeah.
We had a long van ride with the singer, James, and we had a good fair amount of time with them. So to see them as big as they are, it's and I'm not trying to sound mean, but it was a surprise because they weren't the most functional band, and there was a lot of like mixed sort of things going on, and like somewhere along the line they probably got a member or manager or somebody to sort of focus them.
Yeah.
Because I was really surprised they got big, because they had something cool, but they just weren't. They didn't get along. I don't know. There's something about them. It was a weird band. I mean, I'm glad that they got big and did their thing and all that stuff, and more power to them. But that was an interesting thing.
Yeah. My next question. I always ask this. I'm a big movie guy. What was the last movie you watched?
Oh shit. I've been like everybody else. I do all the streaming and stuff. So like sitting through a movie. Damn it. Oh, I used to be such a movie. Sadly, it's probably like a Star Wars, one of the Star Wars movies or something like that. Like I've been so into the streaming these days. I can't think. I mean, God, I used to be such a movie buff too. So sad.
Now, are you caught up in like documentaries or series? Is that the case where you're not watching movies?
Yeah, I mean, because I don't watch a lot of TV, both with work and getting older, and also with of course with family and everything. So like, it's your standards like Ozarks and Better Call Saul and all that stuff that everybody's watching, and the Beatles documentary, and some documentaries that the one I really want to watch, the Dead Guy documentary that just got put out, stuff like that. But it like I've been wanting to watch that for a while, and hopefully I get to watch that this year, because it just like any free time I get usually is allocated to podcasts at night to help me fall asleep. As I used to watch TV to fall asleep, now it's strictly podcasts. So or just something like Ted Lasso, like we've been watching Ted Lasso a lot, that sort of thing, just to shut off. So I haven't had that chance to get like immersed in anything, because if I do, it's usually work related, like I'm listening to an album or something I'm mixing or mastering or working on or something, and I'll listen to it headphones at home with fresh ears and take notes on it, that sort of thing. So I used to watch a ton of movies. I'm not. I like the super action stuff, the Marvel movies and everything, but I don't. The movies I used to like, I don't see a lot of those movies being made, and they're much harder to find, so I just don't really come across them that often.
You were talking about Ted Lasso, so you have Apple TV. Have you heard of the show Severance that's on that?
That's why I got or not why I got Apple TV, because I upgraded my phone and I got a free thing or whatever. But that was the first thing I went after, and I was like, great, I'm signed up, and played the trailer for my wife, and I looked over, I was like, and I could see the look on her face, and I was like, how about Ted Lasso? And I put on Lasso, like, let's watch this. And my wife's great. She, we watch all sorts of stuff, but Severance is definitely high on my list. But I could see where that's something that's it's dark, and I'm gonna have to time that right a little bit.
Yeah, it's really, really good. I haven't finished it yet. I have 2 episodes left, but it's really thought provoking, and it's really, really good. Great series.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely looking forward to watching that for sure. Definitely.
All right, I'll keep going. In the movie realm of things, I always ask this: all-time favorite horror movie.
I'm gonna probably make you mad. I love, and this is probably gonna really make you mad, I love Shaun of the Dead, and I don't know if that's considered a horror movie. Probably not. I mean, it's gory, I guess, but horror movie, because I wasn't super into the genre. I mean, I like the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, probably more than the Friday the 13th movies, but I'm probably making some people cringe because that's about as deep as I scratched that surface. I mean, I had friends that loved Evil Dead and all those movies, and they're great. But I was more, I think I don't know. God, I'm completely blanking. There's got to be something. But Shaun of the Dead is the one that came with me because it just made me laugh too. I thought that was a funny movie. And
Yeah, yeah. Dark comedies are always good, anyways.
I
To
like
be,
I like comedies. Like I like simple stuff that is easy to do but hard to make it good. You know, like Stone or Rock or something.
yeah,
Most
that's true.
bad, but the small portion of it's good is really good. But it's just
Yeah.
um,
Um, my next question: if you've been listening to hip hop at all, what have you been listening to for hip hop?
nothing new. I go back to, I mean, it sounds sad. The last hip hop record I bought was Mos Def, Black on Both Sides. Um, so I mean, what's that? 20 years? I mean, so it's. I mean, Kendrick Lamar, Common from years ago, like maybe that more sort of, I don't know if you call that mainstream, but some of that stuff. I just don't hear anything underground even that sort of some of those compilations and stuff I'll pick up on from time to time, and even artists that I work with, I'll be like, who are you listening to today? And they'll either, it's always like Kendrick Lamar, like everybody always says kind of, it's always the same name, or if it's somebody, it's just nobody that's really kind of, and I'm not even like you have to wow me. It's like just as be, and there's nothing there that really kind of sticks to me right now.
Yeah. I'll have to send you a couple things that kind of sound like our stuff from back in the day. That
Do if because it sounds like you probably, so yeah, please do send me some links because I'm always looking for something.
definitely. All right. My last question is favorite song to play live. What was your favorite Torn Apart song to play live?
Um, probably first song off of the 59 session, just because it was recognizable. It was usually one that went, first or second in our set list, and it had the you could just go nuts with it, and it wasn't super long. And then a close second would probably be the first one off of Nothing Is Permanent. Um, uh, but I think that one too, again, another fan favorite, where it was fun just because you knew the second you started playing it and you see people would recognize it. Um, that was always a blast, for sure. Those were fun songs.
Now, do you think that Torn Apart will ever do what Abnegation is doing and a lot of other bands? Do you ever see, all you guys coming together and doing a reunion show for a benefit or something like that
Uh,
in the near future?
there's a local club here. We were asked maybe a year or two ago, and I don't, I don't, I'd say not likely, because it would be easy. I think it would be easy for me, for Drew, Mike, uh, and Aaron, or Devin. I mean, like anybody with the instruments, drum, guitar. I think it'd be easy for us to just plug into our stuff. I mean, for the drummers, it'd be a little bit more difficult but for the guitars and the bass, we could pull it off. I think Brett would be the thing where I don't think it would I don't know if he would be able to pull it off, and it's not so much that he can't or won't. It's just he really put his all into it when he did it, and I think he knows that he'd have to be solely reliant on his voice, and after not doing it for such a long time, and the headspace he's in right now is such a different headspace where he was. He's a family man. He seems to be really happy, and tattoo artist, has his own tattoo shop down the street. And the funny enough, the guy that I played bass with, the bass player who was in Asthma Castle, I go to his house every once in a while. We're writing songs right now.
Yeah.
He lives like 2 streets over from Brett. It's just like it's crazy small world.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like we got together. I'll have to send you some stuff if I can. We got together after we broke up once or twice and played a show, here and there. Like Turmoil came into town, we played a show with them, and then my brother's band played a show. We played with them one time. Just got back together and just threw a set together and had fun. There might be DVDs of both of them somewhere, but I'll have to get you some of that stuff. And
Yeah, I'd love to see it or hear
I'll
it.
have to get you some of the live. I've got some live recordings. Nothing super fabulous, but good enough. I think I'll have to float your way too. I'll dig through some of the archives for sure.
Now, did you save all of your CDs and vinyls and stuff like that? I always ask everybody if they save their stuff, because some people didn't save anything. They just gave it all away, or they just didn't, or a lot of people saved everything and they have every single vinyl that came out, every CD, at least one for themselves. Is that something that you saved for yourself?
Yeah, I've got. I think I'd like to say I've got most of the shirts, like just one of every T-shirt that we had. We didn't have a ton, but I got a bunch of T-shirts and I've got all our CDs and records and everything, like one copy of everything. I'm sure I've got a bin downstairs somewhere with a ton of dust on it with pictures and stickers and CDs and vinyl and everything. And I none of us really ever had like a mass collection of stuff. Like, so I can't speak for the other guys, but I think as far as that, probably just like one of everything I ever had is just kind of down there again. Like Torn Apart probably had about 8 shirt designs or something. We didn't have like a ton of 8 to 10 shirt designs, I guess, something like that. So and the releases that we had were a ton too. So I probably have everything, I think.
Now, did you see that I don't know what, if it's Death Toll or something, is redoing the 59th version of hoodies and shirts? Have you seen that?
Yes, Travis is his name. If that's who you're talking about, really cool guy. Just contacted me and wanted to redo one of the T-shirt designs.
Mm-hmm.
I think, or I forget what it was initially, and did that. Sent the copy, which is great. Sent me a shirt and sent 2 actually. So I gave one to Brett and thought it was really cool. And again, like I said before, I was just honored. I was like, it's great. It's awesome. And he's like, do you want any money for it? I'm like, no. Like, if you can sell them, that's great. Like,
Yeah.
it's an honor. And I guess he sold them because he contacted me not too long ago and sent me some designs and everything and is redoing. He contacted Carl from Ferret and Jacob from Converge did some designs for some of our stuff. So I think he contacted them too. And both those guys, I think, were like, yeah, like probably like me, like, yeah, whatever, cool, sell some. And he did some mock-ups and everything and sent me some things. So he's got, it's really cool stuff. He's got some some designs that we did have, like skull designs and stuff, and some designs that I think he took, like the cover art of the 59 session, and it's got a T-shirt and a hoodie and everything. So he's got some cool stuff if you're looking for that sort of thing, for sure.
Yeah. I just wanted to know if you were involved in it, so that I could say, like, if anybody's looking for stuff, head over to.
Yeah, please do. It has it has my blessing, has our all of our blessings for sure. Like, super nice guy. Anybody that wants to get him, contact him. So I'm sure he'd be thrilled.
Awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to push, or anything that you got working on now that somebody know about?
No, not that I can think of. Pretty vanilla. Like, I go to bed early. I stream Netflix and Hulu, and I've got a 6-year-old son that I hang out with, and a lovely wife, and so I'm pretty boring person. I'm working with a lot of cool stuff down at the studio, but nothing really complete right now or anything like that. But the Asthma Castle you should check out for sure. It's the touring guitarist for Integrity. Justin, it's his band. He got together. He's been doing it for a long time. He got together with Adam Jarvis from Misery Index, and came in. It doesn't sound like an Adam Jarvis kind of project. It's more like just rock and roll, kind of like I don't know, rock and roll would be the best way, but rockier. If you'll know what I mean if you hear it. But no, I can't think of anything. I'm just appreciative of the interview. You know, like I said, it's always fascinating to me that in a great way that Torn Apart resonated with people the way that it did, and it's humbling, and it's like I said, it's an honor. I mean, it's something that I still try not to take for granted. And anytime somebody says something, or I catch any kind of off random comment or anything about it, I'm always very appreciative of it, because it feels like such a long time ago.
Yeah, well, I'm truly honored to talk with you about Torn Apart. Like I said, just a huge fan. I always was. The 7-inch was the first thing I heard. I didn't hear the demo cassette first, and I heard the 7-inch at first, and I was blown away by that. It was one of my, I wore that 7-inch out crazy. And then Nothing Is Permanent is by far probably, it's a toss-up. The 7-inch and Nothing Is Permanent is my favorite stuff. I still play that all the time. Obviously, it's like I've been listening to it all the time, so I just want to thank you so much for taking time out. Like I said, you're a family man. I'm a family man. Taking time to talk for almost 2 hours is. I just want to say hats off to you. Thank you so much for talking tonight.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. Like I said, thank you so much. And yeah, anything down the road, feel free to contact me. I'll try and float you some of that stuff. I'll zip it up and send it your way, some of the audio stuff. And yeah, feel free to contact Travis, get some gear,
Yeah, definitely. And I'll send you some links to some newer hip hop stuff that I like too. And let's stay in touch. And like I said, thank you so much again, and have a great night.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Hal.
All right, Drew. Take it easy.
See ya.